Houston. Houston, we have a problem. DJ Apollo has landed. I repeat, DJ Apollo has landed.
Hear me?
You are listening to the Tales of Music and Film podcast. My name is Christian Taylor, and thank you for clicking on today's episode. And yesterday was Halloween, and that now marks the end of the Halloween marathon, but I am planning on doing one more Halloween episode. As you guys may remember, I was talking about how I've been trying to set up a time for me and my friend Callan Davis to talk about Coraline, because the movie's 15 years old this year. I figured it'd be good to do that movie because I've always wanted to get a chance to talk about a horror movie with someone. So the horror marathon, even though Halloween's over with, the horror marathon's not quite over with yet. So that's stored away in archive for now, but it will happen eventually. So more scariness is to be had, but we're going to be talking about a different subject today. We're getting into the science fiction realm. But first, I want to introduce, I got a very awesome guest who's making his third time appearance on the show. And my guest is...
Me, Jonathan White.
Yep. Hey, dude, honestly, I cannot put into words like how happy I am that you're back on.
Oh yeah, I'm glad to be here. It's been, how long ago was it we did the Evangelion one?
It's been
several months. Has it been over a year?
It's been a few months at least. It's been 3 months. 3 or 4 months, I would say, maybe.
Oh wow, I was thinking it was longer than that for some reason.
Yeah, it's been a while, but yeah, the first time he was on the show, him and I covered Godzilla in 1954, which is, in my opinion, one of the best episodes I ever did, because I think that was the one recording where I didn't talk very much, because Jonthan was just blowing my mind away with all this amazing info about the history of what led to that movie being made and all that. I was just so intrigued. I barely talked that whole recording, and that is still, in my opinion, one of the best work him and I ever did. And
I feel like it was just a perfect opportunity for me, because I'm just waiting for someone that I can corner and just spill all of my Godzilla knowledge, because I get the opportunity to do that like not very often. So this was like, yes, I've waited years to have a whole hour to just spew knowledge of Godzilla at you. So
yeah, it was very
well for me.
It honestly felt like I was in a history class, to tell you the truth. Like, I'm telling you, I learned more history in that 1 hour recording than I did in high school. Like, the amount of stuff that you were telling me, like, oh my gosh, this is so intriguing, it was amazing. So I am so excited to have him back on the show. We also...
Okay, now, here's the real question, is who has been your most reoccurring guest? Who's been on your show the most?
Well... That would be my two buddies, Preston and Aiden. Like, I did 62 episodes total over at Eastern, and they appeared for a good 40 episodes, I think, something like that. Like, they appeared on my show several times.
Because I was going to say, my goal is to be your most reoccurring person, but it seems I have a lot more episodes to record before I get even close to that level.
Oh, you'll get there. Yeah, me, Aiden, and Preston, like, we did, like, if we're strictly talking just the three of us, we did at least 30 episodes together, maybe more, but you'll get there eventually. And I am very excited, folks, because Jonathan and I are going to be talking about something like, I'm telling you, we are so confident with this topic. We have no notes. There's nothing. No paper. We're not reading off of anything here. Like, this is all strictly memory-based. Because this topic, we're so strong with this that it's like breathing. You ask us, hey, can you talk about this? We could go for like 4 hours. So this is going to be a very easy episode for us to do. So we are going to be talking about... So I always think that I think every person has, like, that one TV show they grew up with that means the world to them. Like, for my mom, for example, it's Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Or with my dad, I think some of his childhood shows were kind of like the Andy Griffith Show, or some other shows like that, or
Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
yeah, or that '70s show, maybe, like that kind of stuff. So I think everybody has like that one show that really means the world to them. And for us, it was Star Wars: The Clone Wars, and him and I were obsessed with this show growing up. And I actually, if my memory serves me right, Jonathan, I think you were the one who convinced me to check it out.
Yes, I do want to clear the record that you weren't immediately caught on with the show and enamored by it, because I have core memory of the very first episode when it dropped. It was I was at your house spending the night because we didn't have TV, my family. So I was at your house, and in the right-hand corner of Cartoon Network, it had a countdown for when the first episode was coming out. And you, at that time, I believe you hadn't watched any Star Wars movies.
No, absolutely nothing. Like, I was so late to the party. Like, so
this was 2009?
Yeah, 2000. Yeah,
so
2009.
Either 9 or 10 years old.
Yeah, so by that point, yeah, I mean, I hadn't watched anything Star Wars yet. It was my Star Wars journey began when you had me start watching the Clone Wars show, and then Grandma gave me her VHS 1997 special edition version of the original trilogy. And the minute I watched those, I was hooked instantly. Yeah. Like, I watched the original trilogy religiously as a kid. Like, I dressed up as Han Solo every time I watched them. Like, I can recite every line from all three of those movies. And yeah, Jonathan was the one who got me to watch it. I mean, because I was kind of reluctant.
Remember, yeah, that first night is you wanted to go to the, I don't remember the name of it, but it was like a pizza arcade place that we used to go to fairly often. And that night you wanted to go, but I said, no, I want to stay because the Clone Wars is starting tonight. And so you got a little bit upset. And so I watched it alone. So it was a little unfair of me because I came to your house. I'm like, nope, I'm watching my TV show that I want to watch when I'm supposed to be hanging out with you.
Oh no, it's fine. I mean, it all worked out. So there was an arcade pizza place in Decatur that sadly closed down like a decade ago. But my dad used to take us in there, you know, sometimes when Jonathan spent the night, and I always loved it in there. They always played the Disney Channel back when it was good. Like, they played all the old Disney shows, yep. Like Empress New Groove and all that. I love that place. I loved the pizza. They had all arcade games in there. I loved it in there. It was very fun. And you know what's funny? I actually remember that a little bit now. Now that you're talking about it, I remember it a little bit. I was pissed. Yeah. Like, I was so excited.
You hadn't watched any of the movies. You had no idea what this was. I was spending the night. It was a weekend. And I just wanted to watch a TV show that I wanted to watch. And so
yeah, but
it all worked out in the end. So
yeah, it all worked out. And it didn't take much to get me hooked. Now, granted, looking back on it, I think the show did kind of have a slow start a little bit.
For sure.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And, you know, that's a crazy thing, you know, like, you know, you and I were having a conversation not too long ago where you and I were talking about the current state of, like, Star Wars shows, for example. And, dude, it's a sad reality to accept. But if the show were to have started now, it wouldn't have made it past the first season.
It would have been absolutely destroyed. No chance given for any character development or anything. It probably would have gotten to season 2, and then they would have canceled it because of fan outcry of, oh, this is so crap, it's just for kids, and yada yada. Because I was unaware of this, but apparently that was part of the kind of fan feedback at the time of the more adults, you know, later 20s, weren't the biggest fans of the prequels, most people, and then even less so of the Clone Wars. And so we are the kind of generation that made it how popular and loved it is today, of growing up on it. But from what I've heard is a lot of the older generation did not like it when it first came out. They thought Ahsoka was stupid. Anakin's not supposed to have, you know, an apprentice or anything. Like, she didn't get mentioned in the movies. But I think if you watch the whole show and take it all as one big package instead of just focusing on the worst, usually the worst bits are the beginning. The beginning was very rough, and people forget is they actually, like, lost some money on this show when it first started, because I think it was like the most expensive cartoon that was ever made at that point.
Oh, it had to have been up
pushed
there.
forward 3D animation to a level that wasn't on TV before because it had the big name of Star Wars. So they had the cash to be able to do that. So George was training this next generation of artists and stuff to, change the craft, to be able to have animation be a bigger thing than it was before budget-wise.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, and yeah, I mean, it's funny. I never really stopped to think, like, it was a groundbreaking show. Now, it's kind of funny, like, dude, those first few seasons, the animation's pretty rough.
Yeah.
Because, like, when you're a kid...
Until season 3 did it start to, like, they really got their stride of the look and the, like, art style, I feel.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think by the time season 3 rolled around, I think they finally found, like, the look, if that makes sense. Like, they weren't really experimenting anymore. That was when they really found the formula animation. Okay, this kind works. So, and I think it got better with each season. I'll tell you what though, man. I think one of my core memories. So if we're talking about the beginning seasons, yes, they were a little rough, but dude, they were very cool. Like, I remember. Now this is a core. So if we're going core memories here.
Oh yeah.
For me, I remember being a kid, going to school at Lincoln School. I would have been, so this was around 2010, I think, when season 2 was getting ready to start. I ran home. Like, I remember Mom and Dad, we always got Pizza Hut on the weekends. I remember the little TV, we had a square TV sitting right here.
Yep.
And I remember sitting crisscrossed, like right here with a plate in my hand with Pizza Hut pizza, watching the countdown go down, waiting for season 2 to start. And I remember there would always be a hologram of Cad Bane
in the corner
taunting you. Like,
and if I remember right, also wasn't like the Cartoon Network logo was like red instead of like the typical like black and white. I could be wrong about that, but for some reason I have a feeling that's how it looked.
Yeah, dude, I'm telling you, Cartoon Network did such an amazing job promoting it. Like, the promotions for it were perfect. And I was so excited because I loved Cad Bane so much. And when I found out that season 2's first arc was all going to be focused on him, like, that drew me in, so much. Because season 1, the final episode, was him doing a job where he had to rescue Jabba's Zero the Hutt, his uncle from prison. So he literally kidnaps the entire Senate hostage, Padme being one of them. And that episode was so good because it was just showing you like how dangerous he is. He was really giving off like, he kind of reminded me of like Clint Eastwood in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah, that was definitely what they were going for, like with the hat, with the gunslinger vibe, having the two kind of hold out pistols, the clink of his boots, kind of like how Boba Fett was in the original trilogy of the cowboy stirrups sound effect.
Yeah.
And he is so cool that every time he walks on the screen, there's a rattlesnake snake sound effect. Every time I think of Cad Bane, I associate that with a rattlesnake because it has like that sound effect almost every time that he is shown.
Oh, 100%.
Very good sound design.
Oh yeah, I agree.
It was prime like Western vibe of a character of that. You think bounty hunter, gunslinger, that's what he was.
Oh yeah, definitely. And another core memory for me, so in my opinion, Jonathan, I think the show really picked up around halfway through season 2. I think the key moment when it really started to pick up was that Geonosis arc. When they went back for the second time, because correct me if I'm wrong, I think that was the very first time that we've seen like a giant full-scale battle. I don't think season 1 had that very much, did it?
Not really. The movie was, very much just rescuing Jabba the Hutt's son. And season 1 was very episodic of just like little adventures that they would go on in each episode, which some of them were very good. But yeah, I feel like that was the first time it felt like a real war. It was, this huge landing operation in the first episode with all the gunships coming down, them getting picked off, and you would see from the point of view of the clones in the ships, and then them dying, and them having to make this LZ landing zone, and so they had all the tanks surrounded. That definitely felt where it was like, okay, this is serious. This is a war, and the tactics and everything came in, and so I feel like you're right. That's when it kind of took a little bit of a turn. There was obviously still more comedic episodes, lighthearted episodes as you continue to go on, but that was kind of the shift into focusing on a little bit of some darker arcs at some points.
Yeah, because I feel like, so just to clarify for all you listening, there was a movie first, and it came out in 2008. Did it play in theaters?
Yes, it did.
It did?
So
Okay.
I saw it in theaters when it came out. And so it is kind of crazy to think about, because for me there's such a huge time gap in between the movies. But that was only 3 years after Revenge of the Sith.
That's
that
crazy.
Was the next movie to
Wow.
come out. And so that was the start of the last of George Lucas's legacy, because the Clone Wars is his last project. It is the last thing that he worked on in Star Wars.
Yeah, that's so crazy. And so yeah, I unfortunately missed out, but did you show me the movie first before I watched season 1? I can't remember if you did.
So I don't think I did. I mean, I could be wrong. That's one of those things that I don't have that core memory of the first time I showed you it specifically. I just remember the first time I watched it, and then slowly you got onto it and you were watching it, but I don't remember the first point of what I showed you. So
Okay.
yeah, that I'm not completely sure of.
Okay, so yeah, it was a movie first in 2008, and then the show started the following year in 2009, and...
One point before we rush it under the rug is I will say, what makes the Clone Wars even tougher to get into is, I'll be completely honest, the movie is pretty bad. The first movie is really hard to watch. The humor isn't funny. Even season 1, the animation got better than the movie. The animation in the movie is honestly pretty bad.
By today's standards.
Yeah, for sure. And even back then, because the reason is they were only partially into production, and it was all going to be, one season of the TV show. So the movie was going to be the first few episodes of the TV show. And then George Lucas said, why don't you just turn it into a movie? Well, George, we have it all planned out for this to be the TV show. He's like, I want it to be a movie by this date. And so they really had to rush and get, a lot of the stuff didn't get done to what they would have liked, because they rushed and made it a movie when the plan was originally that it was all going to be in the opening of the show.
Oh, okay. It's funny you say that, because I was thinking, season 1 had a very odd opening. I literally, season 1, the very first episode is, Yoda and these small group of clones going to make a deal with this species, like those little creatures with the wings.
Yeah, that same as Watto from episode 1, the who owned Anakin, who was his slave master.
Yeah, that same species that he was, and they're shaking.
Tordarian, that's it. I'm a Tordarian.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Thank you. I couldn't remember the name, but I remember season 1 opens with, Yoda and these group of clones going to go to make a deal or something, and the separatists are already there. They shot their ship down, and only Yoda and 3 clones survived. And the whole episode is them fighting this whole army of droids, just the 4 of them. And I'm just kind of like, why didn't this open up with, Anakin, Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, and all of them?
Yeah, the main cast.
The main...
That
we're going to be following. But now that you're explaining, I did not know that originally season 1 was going to open with the arc from the movie of them saving Jabba's son from the separatists. Now that makes more sense to me. Okay. Well, that's crazy. But, I actually remember I showed the movie to my 6th grade class in Tower Hill School. I brought it with me and I played it for everybody, I think. Mm-hmm. Actually, no, I take that back. It wasn't me. Ethan brought it with him. Ethan liked it. So he brought the movie and played it for our class. So that was cool. Getting to watch it in there. The kids, from what I remember, the class really did enjoy it.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I think it is one of those things, you go back and look on it, it is pretty dated, but I feel like that's the case with a lot of shows, because, anything's got its starting point.
Yeah. And it was the rough start of he had brought all these people together that had never worked together, and this was, a brand new form of animation, and so it was so different. It was a really rough start, but you can tell when they got their stride, like I said, probably around halfway through season 2. And so it's not that it was specifically bad. I will say, though, I do kind of think that the movie is honestly bad. From acting perspective, animation perspective, I don't like the movie that much. I don't really go back and rewatch it. But it was kind of the growing pains of them slowly learning their craft and slowly getting better. And that's from season 2 onwards. It just gets better and better and better and better. And so you can just see artists perfecting their craft and just getting really, really good at it.
Yeah, definitely. And so, how did you get into the show? So, like, how did you hear about it? Because, like we said, you showed me. Now, what got you into it?
So, I first remember hearing about it through, it's such a weird way, it was like a promotional DVD. So, I saw the movie in theaters. My dad took me and we went and watched it. And then that was it. I didn't realize there was going to be more than just that movie. Because I didn't have the internet, we didn't have, satellite or cable TV. You're just kind of like very closed off from all that kind of news. And so somehow I had gotten this disc. I don't remember who I got it from, where I got it, whatever. But it was one of those, it was like a promotional disc with like a trailer for the Clone Wars movie, like a little mini game thing. And then it had a trailer for the TV show. And so I was like, what? There's a TV show after that? And so then that's when I learned that the movie was just the start of what was going to be the Clone Wars TV show. And so hearing about that, I got really excited, and then that's when I, not having the internet, I'm like, okay, how am I going to be able to watch this show? So at first, I came, when I learned when the day was and everything, I came here and watched it here. And then I had Grandma record it for me on VHS, so she would know what the date and time was that it was supposed to be recorded, and she would set the recording, give me the VHS when she was done with it, and that's how I'd watch it. So that was like the whole first season. And then we got the internet at my house, and so every week, the day after the episode aired on TV, it would be available on StarWars.com. So that is how, from then on, from season 2 onwards, all of it I watched through StarWars.com. And so that's how I watched every episode.
Oh, man, that really takes me back. It's crazy. You still have one of the tapes that Grandma gave you.
The very first one.
He literally has it displayed in his bedroom. It's like, it's just so cool to me.
Yeah.
Like,
nostalgia.
The nostalgia is insane. But, dude, oh, man, you're talking about the Star Wars website. I remember going on there and watching the episodes on like when my work desk was over there and we still had that very old boxy computer. Yeah, that made the da 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 every time you turn it on. Yep. Oh man, that is crazy.
Off topic, but I also, core memory is we watched like almost all of the Godzilla the series, the cartoon based on the American movie on that as well, I remember.
Yeah, I remember you had a very tiny, like, late 90s TV, super small. It was probably about the size of, like, it was kind of like if you had combined 2 Xbox Ones together or something. Like, it was
very tiny.
And you and I would be laying in your small bed, and you literally had it, like, sitting at the very end of the bed, and we were just watching the Godzilla cartoon that was based off of that 1998 movie.
Yep.
Yeah, so dude, we are really, do you realize like how much we're aging ourselves talking about this? Like that we're like one of the last generations that yeah, we're like one of the last generations to use like those old like late 90s early 2000s TVs and computers and VHS tapes. Like that is crazy to think about,
We'll be probably the last generation that uses that term with like nostalgia of talking about that stuff, because I'm sure there will be kids that know of it, but any family, even if you're poor now, is everyone has a flat screen. Flat screens you can get for so cheap if you don't care about it being 4K HDR amazing like quality, is you can get flat screens used for very, very cheap. So like almost nobody has those old TVs anymore. Usually older people who have never upgraded still have them, but I think almost 99.9% of all kids nowadays are never going to experience that. It's one of those, it's in the past now, we've moved on, and so most people will not have memories of having that.
Yeah, and it's so crazy. I remember one time, I know we're getting off topic. I'll say this right quick, then we'll get back on Clone Wars. But I remember I collect VHS tapes. I actually have it's not brand new, but I have a very good VCR connected to my TV, and it's really cool getting to use it, taking a look back and how much the quality's changed. But I really enjoy watching VHS tapes, and I remember I showed one to my little sister Channing one. She's 9 years old right now, and I remember showing her one. She's like, "What the heck is this? How do you watch this?" Because her generation, it's all streaming. Like, her generation, it's all streaming services.
You
like
just click on it and boom, you
Yeah,
got it.
they don't even use discs anymore. Like, it's so crazy to me.
For me, I'm such a physical collector guy that the act of going on your shelf, picking the movie out, opening the case, taking it out, putting it into the player is like such intrinsic to watching a movie to me. It's like that is the act that you do. And so I still do watch lots of stuff on streaming, but I don't think it ever beats having the physical thing in front of you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that comment. Now, so I talked about when I think the show really picked up, but do you have like a moment where, or was there an arc in the early seasons where you really did feel like, okay, they got it? Like, was there ever a moment, in those early seasons, like 1, 2, and 3, was there ever an arc where you're like, okay, now the story's really starting to pick up here? Like,
Well,
I know it's...
I think Geonosis was definitely one of those for me, where it was like the most intense arc up until that point. Also, the season finale of season 3 was, I think, the darkest up until that point. The Ahsoka arc of where they're captured by the Trandoshans and used as like just for sport. They're just hunting them for sport, and so they're killing these.
Oh,
Jedi
yeah.
Padawans, these kids.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Like,
They just throw them in this forest and start hunting them. And that one was pretty dark, and that was a very big character building moment for Ahsoka. I think that was one of her biggest moments in the early parts of this show. So if I had to pick one, it would either be the Geonosis arc or the season 3 finale of and that's also where Chewbacca showed up.
where we saw Chewbacca for the first time. Yeah, and I remember, dude, when they released the trailer for that arc, I remember the last shot we see is, a Wookiee, standing up, and we all clicked instantly that it was Chewbacca,
Yeah, everyone knew. It was like,
Yeah.
who's a famous Wookiee?
Oh,
Maybe,
gee,
the
I
only
wonder.
one.
And dude, honestly, since we're talking about season 3 for a moment, I think for me, another big arc that really got me was that season 3 arc where Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka are checking out these coordinates, trying to find this mysterious distress call that was found.
The Mortis trilogy.
Yeah, where they get sent to like this ancient planet where they meet this dad who has a dark side son and a light side daughter. And then we see Ghost Qui-Gon Jinn for the first time, I believe, in the show. Yeah.
Which was actually voiced by Liam Neeson.
That is crazy. Yeah, that was mind-blowing seeing him again. That whole arc, man, that really for me was like one of the things that really got me. Like, if we're going storytelling here, I think the storytelling really started to get good from that moment forward. Like, and so guys, we were just talking about this like right before recording, but one of my favorite memories from this show growing up was when they released the trailer for the second half of season 3. And the last shot we see in the trailer was Anakin yelling, like, we see a shot of Ahsoka looking all sickly and evil, like her veins are like all black and her eyes are now yellow, and Anakin yells no, and Ahsoka jumps at him with her lightsabers, getting ready to fight him, and that was the last shot. I remember watching that on the computer, my jaw literally hit the floor. I am pretty sure I immediately got on the phone and called you, like, right after, telling you, like, bro, you need to watch this trailer ASAP. Like, I was just like, what is happening? I was so eager for the show to get back on and see what happened.
Yeah,
like,
it was one of those big cliffhanger trailers where it was like, what the heck is going on? I have to see this immediately.
The waiting was so bad. Like, I want to see this. Like, oh man, that's the one thing. Like, guys, for any of you who like watching shows like as it's airing, the waiting is so hard.
It's killer.
It's killer. You know.
I also feel like it's rewarding because with so many shows nowadays, it's all they drop everything at once on streaming. The Netflix model of like, here's 12 episodes all at once. And when you watch it, you binge it all within like 1 or 2 days. It's really nice to get like the whole story really quickly. But I feel like it's also easier to forget when you space things out and you have to anticipate every episode. As I always find that it sticks in my memory way better if I'm following it week to week. Like, the story and the characters than if I was to watch it all at once. I feel like I retain the information a lot better with that. But people don't like to wait nowadays. They want everything now, all at once. I want it all. And so I feel like it is kind of nice to like pace yourself. It is really tough to actually do the waiting.
Yeah, it is 100%. And now I believe, Jonathan, this will be our last. So we're gonna start talking about the later seasons. But I believe your favorite when we were kids, and we're talking about the first 3 seasons, right? I believe your favorite arc was definitely Zillow Beast.
Oh yeah.
Because the Zillow Beast arc, it was literally Star Wars Godzilla. Yeah. Like, I remember you and I watching that. I'm pretty sure I leaned over to you and I told you literally Godzilla if it was in Star Wars. Yes. So that whole arc, like, what did you think of that one?
That was like, the clashing of my 2 favorite things, which was Godzilla and Star Wars at the time, growing up, and still to this day, some of my favorite media.
Yeah, and it was so the whole story behind that arc is that the Jedi discovered this beast on a planet that's indestructible. Not even their lightsabers can cut this creature's skin. So Chancellor Palpatine, who they don't know is the Sith Lord behind the whole war, has this evil scheme that he wants to, use this creature to make clone armor where it's impenetrable.
Yeah, and it's like, I want this armor that can't be affected by lightsabers. Who are the ones who use lightsabers? Oh, the Jedi Order. That's kind of weird that he would, want all of his troops to be invulnerable to lightsabers. I'm sure that is not foreshadowing anything that'll happen in the future.
Absolutely not. He has nothing but good intentions for this. Of course, right?
He's a politician.
Yeah.
But, a lot of the themes of the Godzilla movies are present in those episodes of the, like, the search for resources. The way they stumble upon them is because they're digging, like, deeper or trying to get this fuel and kind of risking using on fault lines, like using explosives and stuff to get to deeper and deeper sections and get more fuel. And so they end up, creating this crater and awakening him. And he's, this ancient beast that's in legends, and they didn't know if he was even real, and has been in hibernation for however long, maybe potentially thousands of years, just like with Godzilla. And he just wants to be left alone, but they end up, just antagonizing him, and then eventually taking him. And then it switches to more of the King Kong story of taking him, bringing him to the big city where he doesn't belong. And then he breaks out, as always happens, and starts destroying things. And it's not really his fault. You've taken him out of his environment and thrown him into the city for your own purposes. And so it is that, like, very classic monster movie. They take a lot of those elements and just kind of have an homage to the kaiju genre in a little mini arc, which was really cool.
It was very excellent, yeah.
And also them bringing him back, finally, after teasing at the end of that arc, Palpatine tells the Doctor, like, clone more of these things, because I want them. And it was never brought up for over, like, 10 years, almost. And then in the Bad Batch, the newer, the Disney Plus show, they bring back the Zillow Beast and mention it again and actually show it, and they did clone it. And so it brought back that story thread from years and years ago of my childhood and brought it all the way back and are still fleshing it out to this day, which is pretty awesome to see.
Yeah, definitely. I remember when you were telling me that they finally, after like a decade, finally answered the question of what happened to the Zillo Beast, like after that arc. It just, straight up disappeared. We never saw it again. So I've only seen season 1 of Bad Batch, and it is a Clone Wars spinoff. It literally just ended after its 3rd season. Just this year, if I'm not mistaken. So I think I'll definitely have to go back.
It's definitely worth it. It's one of those that I'm glad we're getting these continuations of the Clone Wars. Ahsoka is definitely one of the biggest ones, the live-action show. Dave Filoni finally getting his own spotlight in the new Star Wars canon. And he will be getting his own movie, which will be awesome. I cannot wait to see that. But I'm glad that the Clone Wars has got its appreciation, it's got its love, and the stories are continuing. The Clone Wars is over, but the stories and the characters that show made are still, to this day, going on and evolving and changing, which is awesome to see.
Yeah, it is very awesome to see. Absolutely. And so the next thing I want to talk about, Jonathan, is that, so you and I have had great discussions about this in the past, but why do you think this show worked so well? And for me, one of the main things that I liked that this show did, I think it improved the Star Wars prequel films. After watching this show, I appreciate the prequels so much more now. And I don't know why that is. Like what do you think on that?
Yeah, and for me, we're in such a weird position is we grew up with the prequels. And then also growing up with Clone Wars, it feels so natural, Anakin's progression and everything. But then you just go to just watching the prequel movies and then hearing how everyone else thought about it. I'm like, oh, I get where people are coming from. It just feels like Anakin is there. There was like little hints of it, like Episode 2, where he kills all the Sand People and stuff. But it was a big jump from that, where it's kind of justified, to him murdering children because he wants his wife to not die. And that was where it was a big jump. And in the Clone Wars, they did a very good job of showing Anakin always puts his people first. He always puts the people that he cares about over strangers, over other people. And he is willing to go to pretty much very big lengths to save them and do things that are kind of morally questionable and other Jedi wouldn't do. And he is more than willing to do it to save the people that he cares about. So I think the Clone Wars did a very good job of that, and also the political perspective, because that was a big thing I think a lot of people would agree, is a lot of the political stuff in the prequels kind of gets bogged down with, it wants to be a fun adventure movie, but also be a commentary about like governments and societies and how a society can lead into a dictatorship. That's specifically what George Lucas said his goal for the prequels were. And the Clone Wars does a really good job of humanizing the other side and not just making them the evil, bad battle droids. It makes it to where, okay, specifically the one episode, Heroes on Both Sides, where we see the perspective of the Separatists and how they feel the way they feel and why they think the Republic is kind of a corrupt and broken system that needs to be changed.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think it's really important that we humanize, both sides of this conflict. You can't portray it, one side gets all the story. Oh, the other side, they're just stereotypical villains that our heroes have to mow down with guns.
And
no personality. They're just there to, as the villain, no backstory or anything.
For sure. And I feel like going on the opposite side of we were talking about positives of the show, is one of the negatives you're saying, kind of being stereotypical villains, is there is some of that, especially early seasons. The negatives of the show, I would definitely say what they did with Grievous and Dooku, and some parts Ventress, but they definitely improved Ventress later on.
Oh,
she becomes her own character.
Yes.
But Grievous and Dooku are the mustache-twirling, mwahaha, evil Saturday morning cartoon villains, and they're really not scary and not intimidating in any way, and they just constantly show up. they get beat, and then they run with their tail between their legs, so like every other episode.
Yeah, it drove me crazy. Because I remember, so for anyone who doesn't know, there was actually a little mini Clone Wars show before this that came out back in the very early 2000s, which funny enough, it had the same voice actor who voiced Obi-Wan in this, voiced Obi-Wan in this early adaptation. And was it 2D animation?
Yes, so it was all hand-drawn.
It was hand-drawn. And that was actually, it was those little mini episodes we saw Ventress for the first time. It was,
and Grievous as well, because it actually came out in between the time of episode 2 and episode 3. So that was the first appearance of Grievous on the screen, was this little mini TV show before he actually showed up in the movie.
That's true.
And in the show, he is Jason Voorhees level, like, serial killer, like, Michael Myers. You cannot kill him. He is this invincible Jedi killing machine that is unstoppable, extremely scary, unfeeling, cold like a droid, but still with that mind of a actual flesh and blood creature. And they really, really neutered him and made him not cool in any way in the 3D, the actual Cold Wars.
Yeah, I just could not take him seriously at all. There were so many arcs with him. I wanted to see him be thrown into a pit of lava and just watch him melt away. There are so many arcs. Like, guys, you were this close. You know, like, you almost had him. Really, you know, it's just...
I will say, the one episode that I think they did a good job of him, and it's ironically... in the first season, in one of the early episodes, the area where it's like a little iffy is the Grievous's lair episode, where they actually go to his like a hideout and they have to like chase him. In that episode, he was actually scary, and it showed all of his spare bodies and stuff, and how he swapped out all of his body parts, and you had statues of him before he had been transformed into a cyborg, so you got a little bit of a glimpse into what he was like as an actual person before becoming this thing. And so that was interesting, and it was like scary, and he wasn't like super dumb villain energy like he is for the rest of the series. For some reason they did it really good early on with that one episode, and I can't think of a single other episode that he was really, I liked him in it. He's just really annoying for the rest of the show.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that 100%. I mean, but honestly, though, can you think of any other negatives besides, like, maybe the writing of some of the villains? I mean, I think that may have been the one negative that I have, at least. I mean, there wasn't really anything else, really, that I could really think of that was maybe a negative, because...
The only other one I can think of, but it's very much a Star Wars thing, so if you're watching this show... you should probably have the prerequisite of this is kind of how Star Wars is not everything is in chronological order.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Some stuff will just, because it's an anthology series, it's not supposed to be episode 1 takes place first, and then episode 2, and episode 3, and episode 257. They're all kind of all over the place, so you'll see stuff happen, like at one part of season, I believe it's season 2, takes place before the movie that started the whole thing. And so if you're not really paying attention to that, you'd be like, wait, hasn't this like already happened? This doesn't make a lot of sense. So I feel like that could be a negative. I don't personally count it as a negative, but I think some people could see it that way.
Oh yeah, like I remember watching season 3 or 4 where we see a character show up who died in a previous arc.
Oh yeah.
So it was a friend of like Padme. It was the same species as Greedo.
Oh yeah, the Rhodian senator guy. I don't remember his name.
Yeah, like he got poisoned and he was killed. Then like next season we see him again. I'm like, wait, what? You know, that was the first time I realized, oh, they're showing stories out of order.
Yeah,
like this happened before
they
that.
They don't make it super obvious, which is the problem. It's like they expect you to know what's going on.
It took me a while, you know, to catch on to that. But, I mean, it didn't ruin the show for me in any kind of way. You know, you got to go with the mindset, okay, there's going to be arcs where you're going to see deceased characters come back or events that happen before something else. But other than that, I mean, if you pay close enough attention, I don't think it really would be a problem for
And that's
anyone.
why I said it's very much a Star Wars thing, because you think of the episode, the movies and stuff have come out. You have 4, 5, 6, then 1, 2, 3, then 7, and then in between 7 you have a movie that's before episode 4, and then you have 8, and then you have a movie that's before even the movie that's before episode 4, and then episode 9. And it's all Star Wars has always been all over the place with the release order.
If that's the theme. Now, another thing that I wanted to talk about is that, do you believe that this show improved anything? Like, do you think this show improved anything else that the prequels tried to do, but it was the show that really helped, actually make it work? Because
I feel like it definitely, like I said, with the politics, with trying to show that the Republic has become this corrupt system that doesn't really work anymore, that needs to be changed, but the way that it happens is, it ends up becoming a dictatorship. It ends up, all this bad stuff has to happen before it eventually gets all the way down to the rebellion, defeats the Empire, and you have the new Republic, and it's changed, and it's better. And so I feel like that is one part of the universe that they really fleshed out and really made better. The other is, like I said, Anakin, certain characters getting their time to shine. The biggest one for me, which I think was the best decision they made, was to bring back Darth Maul. Now, Darth Maul was a character that I always like to say wasn't really a character. He was a set piece. He was there to look cool, have a cool new lightsaber, and have a really awesome fight. Like, insanely good fight, and then he dies, and that's it. He has 2 lines in the movie. He doesn't speak. He doesn't have any sort of characteristic. He's a prop. He's there to look cool. And they take this concept and make one of the most interesting characters in all of the Clone Wars, in my opinion, of Darth Maul is this disenfranchised kind of Sith who was promised all this glory, and he was going to help bring down the Jedi Order and be the weapon that destroys them. And he finds out is he was just a tool all along. He was never meant to be the number one big apprentice that Palpatine was seeking. Is he was always just an assassin, a tool. And so he begins to have those delusions of grandeur and wants to become his own man and his own person and step out of Palpatine's shadow and start to build up his own empire. And so you see him do that with the underworld and start to get all these gangs and stuff together and create his own power. And then his big bad boss, when he actually starts to make something of himself, steps back in. And that's what I love the moment in season 5 when Palpatine comes back is Maul doesn't like strut around and be like, oh yeah, why are you here? When he feels that Palpatine has arrived, you can see the fear in his face, and when Palpatine walks into the room, he immediately goes and bows down to him because he knows he does not have a chance against him. So he is so scared that fear, that PTSD of all of the terrible training and everything that he put him through is still such a part of his character. But even then, he tries to, him and Savage, they try to beat Palpatine, but needless to say, it doesn't go too well. And it ends up, and then Maul goes to a very dark place, and I think that's what his arc, it goes all the way into Rebels, and it does a really nice way of showing how he becomes broken, and how it's like seeing a Sith that lives long enough to realize that what is the point, because he doesn't get all this power, he doesn't get everything that the Sith promise, you get to do whatever you want, you get this power. He becomes this broken individual that has been used and abused by other powers just to get what they want. And so that's why I think it makes him such an interesting and cool character, like one of my favorite characters in the whole show. And he had no lines in episode 1. He was just there. And so taking that and making him a full-fledged, fleshed-out character was one of the best things the show did, in my opinion.
I could not agree with that 100%. I could not agree more. That was great. anytime he was on screen, I was so excited to see him. And can I just give a huge shout out to the voice actor?
Yeah, Sam Witwer.
Who was also Star Killer in the Force Unleashed games.
Such a cool crossover to have him come back, because I remember playing the Force Unleashed, one of my favorite Star Wars game, and to have him be the voice of Darth Maul was just like so awesome.
I know he is he's got major talent. Like, he is awesome. He was so good voicing Maul. Like, he was perfect. Yeah. Like, do you remember?
I would even strain to say that I think he's the best voice actor in that show. Is there some scenes, especially in season 6, the ending, the Siege of Mandalore arc, where his acting is like top tier. He is such a good voice actor.
Oh yeah, he was. The amount of talent that man carries is insane. Like, I'm telling you, man, one of the best voice actors I've ever seen.
Oh yeah,
like,
for sure.
He's great. And so, Jonathan, another thing that I wanted to ask you, right? So let's go over to characters for a second. And you and I were talking about this before, but would it be a fair thing to say that this is Ahsoka's show? So Ahsoka Tano was first introduced in the Clone Wars movie that we were discussing earlier, and she becomes Anakin's Padawan. And I believe she had to have been up there with the most screen time.
Yep.
Out of all of the other characters that we see in the show, I think she may have had definitely top 3 at least most screen time. Like, and I would even go as far as saying I think Ahsoka Tano had the biggest growth as well out of anyone else in the show. And she is 100%. She's always been my favorite character in the entire show, and I'm not ashamed to admit this. Had a huge crush on her when I was a little kid.
Oh yeah, same. I definitely did.
Yeah, she was amazing, especially when they gave her the updated look in later season 3 when she was a teenager.
Teenage look.
Yeah, like, I really fell in love with her after that. Like, she was such a cool character. I loved her so much. Like, any episode with her as the lead, I was like, let's go. Like, yeah. I loved her. So, like, what do you think on that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. That is the one biggest point about her that I think a lot of people still, like, I talked to Julia, because Julia, somewhat watched almost all the Clone Wars growing up with us as well. And she couldn't be more different than our opinion, is she hates Ahsoka. Because that initial impression of Ahsoka is she's this really snarky, annoying, pestering kid who, like, doesn't know how the world works and all that. And they did that, and Dave Filoni's talked about this, is they purposefully did that because that leaves room for so much growth, for her to become such a better character. And she does throughout the show. Is she's always snarky, she's always quippy, but she molds herself and becomes a more mature person. You see where Anakin has trained her enough when it gets to points where Anakin starts to embrace some of those darker parts about himself. Is Ahsoka's there as kind of like his backstop, his like, hey master, I know what you're going a little too far. We need to like rein you in. And so Ahsoka matures enough to where she can support other people, and she becomes more of an adult and feels herself and becomes more who she's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And that goes. And even, like I said, to this day, like the Ahsoka TV show, is we're now seeing like her full evolution into like a master. Is she has her own student, her own apprentice, Sabine. And so her journey is still continuing to this day. And so that's really cool, is everyone has like their protagonist of you grew up with. Like for my dad, it's Luke. Luke was his guy. He was the one that started out with the first movie. You saw his growth, become a full Jedi warrior, defeat the Emperor and all that. And some people know it's Anakin. But for me, it's Ahsoka. Ahsoka is the one from the age I was her age too, watching the Clone Wars. And so seeing her grow and become an adult, is you have that attachment to her. And so I think that is one of the best parts of the Clone Wars, is seeing her growth, her change throughout the whole series.
Yeah, and just seeing her grow was so cool. I really enjoyed, like, my favorite episodes is when Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, and Anakin were together, because for me, they were like the main trio of the entire show, they were like my top three, favorite characters. I loved the interaction between them, and I really loved the friendship between Anakin and Ahsoka. That, if you were to ask me what my favorite element was of this show, it was their friendship. The amount of times Anakin went above and beyond to protect her, and heck, I even enjoyed the scenes of Padme and Ahsoka together. Like, did you ever notice Padme literally treated her like she was her daughter?
Yeah,
like,
they had a very good sister kind of relationship.
Yeah, like Padme hugged her that one episode. Like she got so excited to see her. Like she loved Ahsoka, and I lived for those moments. I loved it. Big family vibes, like. If things had went a different way, Ahsoka would have been like that aunt character for Anakin and Padme's kids,
Luke and Leia, and that's what we've got little hints of it, and I hope we get into it more. But in the Book of Boba Fett, where her and Luke have a little bit of an interaction, that's where childhood me dreamed of a day where we got to that point of where she can talk to Luke about his father, because Luke never really knew Anakin. He knew Darth Vader. He knew what he become, and he heard stories about Anakin. But and he was able to talk to Obi-Wan a bit, but Obi-Wan never really went into it too much.
No.
But being able to talk to Ahsoka, which is was so close to Anakin, and be able to get that insight of when his father was a good man, I really want to see more of that. They teased it just a tiny bit in Book of Boba Fett, and I feel like they're saving it for later on, and we're going to get that full conversation between Luke and Ahsoka, and that is what I'm really hoping for. That is one scene, space battles, lightsaber fights, don't care. That's the real meat and potatoes of the drama, the storytelling of the characters that I really look forward to.
Oh yeah, yeah. I would love to see that just as much as you do. Just give me 1 5-minute scene of her just telling Luke the stories on some of the adventures she had with him. Just give us that one scene. I can die happy. Just give me that. I would love to see that.
Oh yeah.
Now, I gotta tell you, man, there's one criticism I have, so we can start talking about the later seasons here a little bit. This episode may go a little longer than planned. You know what? That's okay. I'm having a lot of fun with this. This is a really good conversation. I want to keep it going here. So, we're going to talk about the later seasons. So we've talked about seasons 1, 2, and 3. So let's go through 4 through 7 a little bit. So a criticism I had with the later seasons, with Ahsoka, for example, is that in the early seasons, I really liked her for that loving, caring side that she had. Really going out of her way to protect her loved ones, and stuff like that. But dude, I gotta be honest with you, I feel like in the later seasons, they kind of started to strip that from her a little bit. Especially in season 7, she felt really, obnoxious and cold towards people at times. Or even distant, I would say. When she has that final conversation with Anakin before she heads off to fight the Mandalorians with Rex and her clone task group, she felt very distant towards him. Not one hug, not oh, how you been, master? I've missed you so much. None of that. I was a little disappointed, to tell you the truth. I mean, granted, it had to go that way to make sense to why he turned to the dark side. he was happy to see her, but there was still a void.
Very, very purposeful, the reason they did that.
Yeah, but for me, it's just the last couple, she wasn't even in season 6 because, little side note, the show was sadly canceled the show was halfway through its 6th season, so apparently they had plans to do 8 seasons and call it done. And they were halfway through season 6 when the show was canceled because Disney bought the rights to Star Wars. George sold it to them. He got an insane amount of money that 5 generations could live off of.
Yeah. Billions of dollars.
Yeah, and they pulled the plug, and Jonathan and I cannot express to you how heartbroken we were when that happened. It took me a while to get over it. But then suddenly in 2020, Disney announced that they were going to do 12 episodes and give the show its ending. And so we got 12 new episodes, and we were, I mean, granted, to this day, I am still sad that they didn't finish the other 40 episodes that are in the archive. Part of me hopes that one day they can do like a Clone Wars Lost Episodes or something, where they can release those 40 episodes. Like, the voice work's all finished up, it just, the animation needs tidied up, and then it's ready to go. I feel like that's just a shame and a crime just to have them sit there and not be released to the world. So I'm hoping maybe one day we'll get them. I don't know. But at the very least, silver lining, I am very happy that the show got its ending. So
what an ending it is, because I kind of count it as a movie, because how they structure the last 4 episodes is they have like the opening title cards of Lucasfilm and everything in the old style of the movies, and even the opening is a flip on the opening of the original Clone Wars movie. And so if you count that as a movie, which it's not, it's the last 4 episodes of the show, but for me, that is up there as one of my favorite pieces of Star Wars media ever. It is so lovingly crafted, and you can tell they took, because it took years from the announcement of the final season before we got it, and it shows in every single scene, especially in the finale, is you can tell Dave worked long and hard to give it the proper ending that it deserved, and it really shows through.
Yeah, it does. And but before we go any further on that, I guess I'll just ask you, so do you think Ahsoka felt a little ruined to you in the later seasons? Like, so season 5, like literally season 5 ends with, the trial where Ahsoka is confirmed to be innocent for a crime she didn't commit. And this was the episode that we mentioned where the council literally turned their back on her without any evidence whatsoever. They just pinned it all on her, thinking that she was the one who did the explosion that killed innocent people. Wasn't her. They didn't apologize. They're like, hey, want to come back? Heck no. Then she just leaves. And the last shot we see is her just walking off into the sunset with Anakin watching her leave. And then we get that ominous ending song where it's not the happy thing that we're so used to. It was a sad song.
Yep.
And
the first time they switched it.
But season 5, and then when she comes back in season 7, she didn't feel like the same character to me. It felt like she was more cold towards people. Like, she wasn't very smiley anymore. She wasn't really caring or anything, distant. Like what do you think?
Like I said, I feel like that was very purposeful. They did it on purpose, and for me, I agree with the decision, because what it's supposed, like, her arc is, after season 5, after she leaves the Order, it's all she's ever known, literally since the first moments that she's had memory and been alive, is she's been with the Jedi. She was taken as a baby. So all she knows is the Jedi. That's been her whole life. And so suddenly she gets disillusioned with him and stops believing in that religion, basically, and leaves. And has to go out on the big bad world by herself. And so she leaves everyone and everything she's ever known. And so that changes her. She has to toughen up. She has to figure out how she wants to live in the world by herself. And she really started to dislike the Jedi after that. She liked the idea of the Jedi, what they were supposed to be, but not what they had become. Had become this bureaucratic political system, and they're supposed to be third party, of just their goal is to help people. But now they've become generals. They've picked a side in this war, which ends up being their downfall, is because they chose a side and said, we're going to fight for this system, even though it's corrupted, even though it's messed up, and we're saying our side is right. And so she fundamentally disagrees with them on every way. And so when she comes back, it's them, wanting to use her again, basically. And so I feel like that's why she's so distant, that's why she's so cold, is even to Anakin has his problems, but he is still a part of that system. So he still, to her, represents all those problems with that system. And so that's why she is kind of cold to him. And I don't think they still have their good moments. The moments when he hands the lightsabers over to her You know, they're smiling at each other and everything. There still is a little bit of that reunion. It's not as warm and fuzzy as you want it to be, but it's real. And I feel like it also makes it more tragic when later on, that is the last time they interact, and she's not there for him when he's at his worst point and he falls. And so the next time he sees her is when he's Darth Vader.
And then Rebels.
And so that makes it more tragic. That makes it a lot more sad, but I feel like that makes it better character-wise. It makes it better written-wise. It's not happy. It's not what you want to see, but I feel like it was the right decision in my opinion.
Yeah, when you explain it like that, yeah, it makes a lot more sense, definitely. He's still a part of this system that you disagree with 100%, so that's going to make a little bit of a void between you.
Yeah.
But there were still good moments. It wasn't all bad, you know? Like, him giving her those twin blue lightsabers, like, that was cool. I remember seeing that in the trailer. I was just like, oh, man.
Yeah.
Shit's getting real.
It was, like him giving a part of himself to her, because he was always associated with that, the blue blade. And so that was kind of him passing it off to her.
Yeah.
She's her own person now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really enjoyed that final arc when she got her own clone battalion and they all have the orange paint on their helmets.
Just
like
to give tribute to her and say, hey, like, you're our commander. Just because the Jedi, made you, they didn't kick you out, but made you leave because of how they treated you, we still think of you as our commander.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's I want to lead into that a bit, is it's in the name, but such a big part of the Clone Wars that I think was one of the huge improvements was making the clones characters. In the movies, there was not a single real piece of armor in the movies. They were a CGI army, and they did their point, and they were not characters. Jango Fett was a character, but all the clones were. There was no characterization. They were like, yes, sir, no, sir. We are soldiers. That is it. There was no friendly business. They're just the soldiers who end up killing the Jedi. And in the Clone Wars, they become actual people. And they have thoughts and opinions on who they are and why they are and what they're doing. They're literally bred and cloned purely to fight and die for this system. And so some of them have opinions on that. Some of them kind of disagree with that. Like, hey, I'm literally born just so I can die for something I'll never be a part of. And some of them embrace that and know that they're protecting people that can't protect themselves and are fighting for the idea of the Republic, of the idea for everyone having freedom and free will. And so I think that is one of the best parts of the Clone Wars, especially Rex. Rex is the Ahsoka is like the main character of the Jedi, of the new characters. To see it from her point of view, Rex is the clone that we follow from day one.
Oh yeah, he was there
the
whole time,
the whole show.
Yeah,
and see his change and see how, by the end, that's what makes Order 66 hit so hard, is we've grown to love these guys for 100 and something episodes. And then to see them against their own will be forced to kill the people that they've been fighting and dying alongside this whole time. And it makes it extremely tragic and heartbreaking. I feel like that scene, Order 66, now is like the saddest moment of all of Star Wars for me. Is it really put it in perspective of what that really means. It was a cool twist for Episode 3, but the Clone Wars made it a absolute tragedy of how these guys were bred and used as just tools so that Palpatine could eventually force them against their will to kill the Jedi. And that's their only reason they were ever made.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And dude, I gotta tell you, man, the best clones, so I'm telling you right now, guys, the best clones in the whole show, besides Rex, Domino Squad, Fives, Echo, Cut Up, Hardcase, and all of them. We see these clones for the very first time in Season 1, in that one episode on the Irishi Moon outpost.
Yep.
And it gets attacked.
Is that Clone Cadets?
Yeah, Clone Cadets. Yeah. We see them for the very first time in Season 1. And in my opinion, that episode with them was the best episode of Season 1. That episode was so cool because we see them defending the base. we see Heavy just going freaking Rambo on the droids,
Yep.
using that minigun, just mowing him down.
Also, I don't know how this slipped by, but they used a curse word in that episode.
Yeah, what the hell was that?
I don't know how. This was Saturday morning cartoons. I don't know how that got by, because it never happens again. That is the only episode where there's a curse word, but I still, to this day, don't know how that got allowed.
Yeah, I know. I you know what's funny? I didn't catch that until way later. I was like, oh, I didn't realize it. How is that allowed? I don't know, but then we see Domino Squad again in season 3 with a out of chronological order episode where we see the group as cadets training on Camino, and we see their whole journey of them trying to, because the final thing they have to do before they graduate to become soldiers is they have to get through this simulation battle, and they keep failing because they're not working together as a team. And then we get to see them how they got their nicknames. We learn that Fives got his nickname because each clone, they don't have a name. It's a series of numbers is their name.
Fives is CT5555, so they just call him
Fives. Then Heavy got his nickname from an old clone cadet that was he didn't grow correctly. Now he's extremely old and he can't fight. And he's like the janitor of Camino.
Isn't it nines?
99.
99.
Yeah.
And that's where Bad Batch gets its name, is their Clone Force 99, in honor of him, because he was kind of a deformed clone, and so the Bad Batch is all kind of deformed in their own way, but they have special abilities because they are different. They're mutated, so they have abilities that the other clones don't.
Yeah, and it was such a great way to open up season 3, getting to see them again. And then, going back to season 1 with that episode with all of them, the entire group was wiped out except for Fives and Echo. They were the only two out of the squad to survive the episode. Then we see all of them together in the flashback episode at the beginning of season 3. And then we see Heavy and Echo again during the season 4 premiere, I think it was, where Camino's attacked by the Separatists.
Yeah, I think that was the first episode of season 4.
I think.
Yeah.
But we see them again, and then they were so brave in defending Camino that they were given the next rank, ARC Trooper, which is what they always wanted. Yep. And then we get to that episode, that arc, where this group, Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka, and Plo Koon... No, Plo Koon didn't go with them. But
Evan Peel, I think was his name, the kind of Yoda-like guy.
Yeah. They had to go into this Separatist complex. It's one of the most deadly bases in the galaxy to go rescue this guy who had...
Citadel.
The Citadel, yeah. And that arc was very cool because they end up getting trapped inside this base. It has millions of traps set up, And it was a very stress-inducing arc. And in the second episode, at the very end, Echo, at the time, we believe, died.
Yep.
Dude, I remember you, me, and Julia were in this very room watching that episode when it aired. And when Echo died, you didn't realize it. Julia and I were freaking the heck out. They did not just do that.
Yeah,
and you're
I just missed the context of who had died, but for some reason... I don't know if I had walked out of the room or what it was, but somehow I missed that was Echo that had died.
Yeah, and Fives is the last one. It was such a heartbreaking moment. Fives yells out his name. We just see Echo's burnt helmet on the ground, and everybody has to run away.
So then Fives is the last surviving member of Domino Squad, and then in season 6, you again it leads into the tragedy of Order 66. Is the brain chip arc where Fives finds out what is going to happen, and he's the only one that knows the secret, and so he has to die. So he ends up getting killed trying to get the secret out and let everyone know what is going on. And so he ends up taking that to his grave, but it still is relevant because if you remember in the final season when he's about to turn, he says, fives, find fives, and then that's when he finally snaps, and it's like he's not in control anymore. But that's how Ahsoka ends up finding out what's going on, and what happens is because of the chip.
Yeah, and then we find out in the final season that Echo is still alive, and they rescue him during that first arc of season 7, and Echo joins Bad Batch, and then he becomes a main character in the Bad Batch spin-off show.
Yep.
So I'm happy that we had one sole survivor from the Domino Squad. So yeah, Jonathan, I cannot express to you. That's one of the things I loved about this show was how good of a job they did humanizing the clones. And I actually really did enjoy, there were several episodes in this show where clones were, we even had an episode, I think in season 1, where we had a clone betray. He was giving... Yeah, he was giving information to the Separatists about where the clones were set, where they were going to attack and all that, because he wanted freedom away from the Republic, because to him, he was just grown to be a soldier, and that's all. He didn't like that. Slave. He felt like a slave, and we can understand where he's coming from to an extent. We don't agree with what he's doing, but we understand the mindset, So I think it was really cool to show not all the clones, agreed with what they were bred to do. And I think that was a very cool thing to show. And I really did enjoy how they introduced the mind chip, showing you, these guys were forced against their will. They had no say. No one knew. It was so cleverly well hidden. Oh yeah, by the way, guys, each one of you has a little chip inside your brain that's going to be activated.
Force you to kill the people that you've been growing close to for years.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes, that Order 66 that much more heartbreaking. Dude, I gotta tell you, I got chills where, Ahsoka turned, she's in the bridge of the ship, they're heading back, they captured Maul, and then she feels Anakin turn to the dark side, right? Yep. And she walks through the bay doors, and she sees the hologram of Palpatine telling Rex to execute Order 66. Then all the clones just start shooting at her.
Yes.
Then the sad music kicks in, and she has to kill a bunch of them and jump into the vent. It was so insane. I got chills, dude. It was.
It is chilling. The scene during that scene, the thing that makes me the saddest the most is seeing Rex's reaction, because you don't see this with any of the other clones in any other scene of Order 66. Is you see Rex fighting it as hard as he can. You see him drop his helmet, his hands are shaking, and then you see him go for his guns he's not in control. He grabs his guns, you see him, tears are coming down his face, and that's when he yells, fives, find fives. It is the last moment of lucidity, of sanity that he has before it's taken over. And immediately after that, you see him almost go robotic. He puts his helmet on, he is telling orders, and we need to find her and kill her. And so you can see how close Ahsoka and him got, more than I think almost any other clone or Jedi. And he did his best. He fought as hard as he could, but he still could not resist it. All of his effort, all of his will, bought him a few seconds, and that was it.
Yeah, and yeah, and I gotta tell you, did you not? I'm telling you, man, the final shot of this show was so hard to watch. So the cruise ship that Ahsoka and all of them were on, it crash lands on a frozen planet, and then Ahsoka and Rex survive. They manage to get on a ship before it crash lands, and Ahsoka leaves her sabers behind in the rubble to make it look like she died in the crash. And her and Rex get on a ship and leave, but they bury the clones that they find that were left behind. And each grave has their helmets sticking above it. And the last shot we see is Anakin walking up there as Darth Vader, picks up Ahsoka's helmet, picks up Ahsoka's sabers, throws it on the ground, then the camera just pans down to one of the clone helmets.
And it's broken.
It's broken and battered.
It's broken, and that is showing that's the end of the Clone Wars. It's not a big, happy, we won, the end. All of it led to that. Most of the clones dying being used to kill the Jedi, and almost all of the Jedi being wiped out, and the Empire rising in its place, and Darth Vader and all that. And so it is such a bitter, I wouldn't even say bittersweet, it's just a bitter ending. It's a sad ending. And we know things get better. If you watch Rebels, if you watch Ahsoka, those characters go on and they do their best, but it's that sad ending that's required for things to get to how they are in the original trilogy. Like, we knew things were not going to end well.
Yeah, exactly. And man, that last shot just really got me. You know, it's like, it's funny. And we grew up watching these characters grow, and then to see it just end like that. I mean, we all knew in the back of our minds, we all knew it was going to get there eventually, but it's like we were never prepared. You know,
it was that thing in the back of your mind of always, well, we don't see Ahsoka in the movies, so she could always die. There was always that she could die in Order 66 because she's a character they created just for the show. We never knew if they could survive, because that was always the thing about Obi-Wan and Anakin. You see them in any episode, you know they're going to be fine, because obviously they have to be. But with those other characters, it was, they could actually get that reaction out of you of like, I don't know what's going to happen to them. I don't know if they're going to make it through this.
Yeah, I know. And so do you think that do you think the show overall did a really good job of having things make more sense? Because I know you and I talked about this before. There is slight continuity errors on a couple of things. Like, I remember, you know, in episode 3, there's a few dialogue scenes that doesn't make any sense. Like, when Anakin meets Grievous for the first... Like, when Grievous for the first time, like...
It becomes kind of a gag in the show, is Anakin and Grievous don't actually ever meet in the show. They see each other, like, through a hologram, or there's literally scenes where they're almost passing each other in a hallway. And there's one scene in particular, I'm sad it never became an episode, but they released some partially done episodes, and there's one gag that I find just, like, so hilarious, where it's literally, like, Grievous and Anakin popping their head up and down, I don't remember what the context is, but just missing each other by that much, just so that scene in episode 3 can happen, where they never actually meet face to face.
Yeah, I always thought that was so funny, because they had to keep the continuity as close as possible.
They were very loose with it, but it was just kind of like they had fun with it.
Yeah, I'm glad at the very least they were able to make a joke out of it, you know. But I think it's kind of funny when Obi-Wan and Grievous are having that final battle before Obi-Wan kills Grievous. And, you know, Grievous, before the saber battle starts, he's like, "You fool, I was trained in your Jedi ways by Count Dooku." Like, it means like, oh, so what about the other million lightsaber fights you guys had before this?
Had, like, memory loss and just forgot every time they fought throughout the show.
Yeah, but other than that, I mean, the show...
Also with Dooku is, in episode 3, you know, Anakin's like, my power has doubled since the last time we met. What, you mean since, like, last week? Because we fight, like, 80 times throughout the TV show. And that's one thing that I kind of agree. George Lucas and Dave Filoni has talked about this, because this has been a big thing that's shown up with a lot of the new shows and things. They're very loose with the continuity of all those little details where nerds like me, I used to be this way. Of any little thing that they contradicted, I'm like, this is dumb. I know this, and I'm just a fan. Have you not read this book? Have you not read this comic? This one tiny line? And they're like, hey. It's not that important. If we sacrifice maybe this little thing that they say not making a whole lot of sense to get a better story, that's the better option. So for them, the idea was, what, do we just have Count Dooku and General Grievous not show up in the Clone Wars at all because they can't be fighting Obi-Wan and Anakin? It was more of... I don't think that's the best example because Grievous and Dooku kind of suck in that show.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like there are reasoning behind it makes sense. Because they do that a lot with the modern shows, is there's so many books and comics and stuff. And some of it they just kind of like push to the side and be like, we're going to do our own version of that and kind of have the same spirit of whatever the book was supposed to be. But when you buy the book, when it comes out and saying, hey, for example, there's a book that's just called Ahsoka, and it's Ahsoka right after Order 66, and she's living on her own. And you're like, okay, this is the story, and you add that to your headcanon of this is what happened to Ahsoka after this. And then they come out with Tales of the Jedi and have an episode that's doing that same thing, but changes a whole bunch of stuff. You're like, hey, I bought this book, you told me this is the story, and now you're changing the story, so I can see where that can kind of rub people the wrong way. If you buy these things, these comics, these books, and then they get changed later on. And that's where I can understand why people get upset, but I also understand the creator's point of view of why they want the room to be able to change things and not feel like they're trapped in a box of we have to listen to every tiny thing that they said in each movie. They made one little mention of this thing, so that means we can't go and do this story. Right. So if you sacrifice that and just like kind of, you have to work around and be like, well, you have to try to make it make sense. It's more of like, okay, it's not that big a deal. It's a small little thing.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I was just pointing at it more of like a gag more than anything else. I mean, it never bothered me. I mean, the line still works. Like, hey, maybe he improved more since since they fought last, which is like maybe a few weeks ago, or something. You know,
it always bothered me too. It was always like, that's dumb. They just didn't pay attention to the movie. But when I heard their point of view, and they're like, it's not, we don't want to feel constrained. We want freedom to make the stories that we want. And I'm like, okay, I get their point of view. That makes sense to me.
Right, yeah, absolutely. I get it. Yeah, and they make a very good point. I get it. I mean, okay, a few little bits of dialogue are going to make sense.
Yeah.
Big deal, you know. It doesn't ruin the story in any kind of way, you know. So I'm trying to think, like, you know, so do you think that the show, was there a bad season, do you think? Do you think there was an arc where you're like, okay, that could have been cut, or do you think there was a weak season, or do you think overall, like, obviously nothing's perfect, but the way I look at it, I think the show had a very good, solid run. Yeah, there were some weak moments, but I mean, it's all watchable, I think, you know, like, even with the rough first season, I would watch it right now.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Know. Like, I still watch episodes of season 1, but I still will stand by, I think it is a rough start, and it's hard to get people into it, especially now, like, you're not a kid anymore. It's harder to get people into, you know, a little bit of the rougher start of a kid's TV show, even though it does get really dark and more serious and mature later on, it is kind of that barrier of entry where it is tough to get people into it.
Yeah.
So season 1 is definitely that rough spot.
Yes.
But as you go along, I genuinely feel every season gets better. Season 2 is better than season 1. Season 3 is better than season 2. Season 4 is better than season 3. And they just get better and better and better as you go along.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I couldn't agree more with that. That's how you know you have a good show, when they just improve it. You're like, oh, they can't top this, then they just keep topping it, you know, and it's great.
Usually the problem with most TV shows is it goes the opposite, is the shows start out amazing, and then they go on for way too long, and then you're like, they should have canceled this show like 5 seasons ago.
Yeah, I know, dude, there's a good few shows I could name, like, right now. Like, my golden rule is, I think a show should go at least 5 or 6 seasons. To me, that's a good run. I think by the time you get to, like, 6, I think you need to start thinking of the ending.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
Start thinking, okay, we need to start wrapping this up a little bit. Because, like, the minute you hit double digits, it's just kind of like, okay, you're milking this thing for every cent. Like, I don't think a show should go for that long. Like, I've seen shows go, like, Supernatural, dude, 15 seasons.
That's insane.
Like, that's ridiculous. And then you got, like, Grey's Anatomy going on season, like, 17 or something. Like, it is ridiculous.
Crazy numbers.
Yeah, then you got, like, I've seen shows go, like, Law & Order SVU, they're on season 23, I think. Like, what the heck, man? Like, 23 years!
I think the only time you can have those, like, extremely long-running shows is when it's, like, a comedy or something. Because for those, it's like, you can end it whenever. It's always just about when do we start running out of good ideas for jokes and stuff. Because with those type of shows, whenever they end, the episode always does kind of come out of nowhere, and it's like, all right, everybody's moving away, and the end. Because it's not really about a story. It's always about having these characters be in silly situations and be funny.
Mm-hmm.
It's not serious character development or progression. So that's the only time I feel like shows are alright when they run for really long periods of time. It's usually comedies.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Yeah. So, the last thing, Jonathan, I think I'll ask you before we wrap this up is, what would be the rating that you would give Star Wars The Clone Wars? And we're talking out of 10 here. What would you rate this?
Well, it's tough because it's one of those things that it is like my favorite childhood TV show, so of course I'm gonna rate it high. So I'm gonna rate it based on my purely subjective how much I absolutely love this show. I can't really go outside of myself and be critical about it and be like, okay, from a critic's point of view, blah 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 blah. This is such a show that's tied up with me personally, my personal feelings. I can't do that. So I would give it like a 9 out of 10. It was one of the best, my favorite TV shows. I absolutely love The Clone Wars, and I'm purely biased. It's a lot of childhood nostalgia, but I can't change that, and I don't want to change that.
Yeah, I don't think you should. Like, guys, I just want to clarify. It's like, I'm sick and tired of this stupid narrative, in my opinion, that younger people seem to have this idea that younger people today seem to have this idea that nostalgia is a bad thing. And I'm like, why? Okay, I love something because I grew up with it. That makes it bad? That doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. I hate this biased thing we got going on here. Like, oh, you're only liking it because of nostalgia. Well, what's wrong with that? I don't see a problem.
Yeah, you enjoy it.
Like, okay, I'm enjoying something. That's a crime? I don't think so. Like, that's so dumb.
And
Like,
I think people, like, for me, I can be objective with some things. Like, I will be honest, I'm a big Godzilla guy. I love Godzilla, all 38 movies. Some of those movies are really bad, and I will say that straight up. As a movie, you show that to anyone who's not a fan of that type of stuff, they're going to be like, this movie sucks. And I can view that and see that. But for me, I have that attachment for my childhood. For me, it's, oh yeah, I love this thing, and I can see that if I didn't grow up with this and I watched it, I probably wouldn't like that. But it doesn't change that I do like it. So some things I can be that kind of objective of. I see where people are coming from and why they would hate this thing, and I understand that, but that doesn't change my love for it. With the Clone Wars, the rough start is the only thing I can see where people would be like, I don't know if this show is for me, but I genuinely think it is extremely well written, especially for a kid's show. It is a very complex, like a multi-layered narrative and characters for a kid's show. It gets really serious. And so I think it is genuinely a really good show.
yeah, and for me, I think this show, I mean, and one last talking point I guess we could talk about, I'll give you my rating here in a second, but I think it was kind of funny. Like, I remember watching a video on YouTube once where it's like Clone Wars not being a kid's show for 8 minutes. It's just showing all the scenes of like characters getting
stabbings and beheadings and just terrible things happening.
Yeah, Ventress kissing that one clone before she impales him with her lightsaber. Yeah. Like, there's so many things, you're thinking, like, how the heck did they get away with that airing on Cartoon Network?
It was like 9 a.m. on Saturday mornings.
Yeah.
Like, SpongeBob hours is the time that this show was playing.
Yeah, but still, yeah, this show it did a clever way of introducing adult things in a kid's show. Yep. Very well. And if we have to talk about my rating, 9.5 for me. Because, dude, I was obsessed with this show, like, when it was on. It gave me so much. Like, it made me happy. I really felt like I was a part of something, And this show really got me thinking about a lot of things. It expanded the lore. It helped me love the prequel films even more. And it did a great job of growing all the characters. And I think it did a great job of filling in the gaps on some things that were left unanswered.
Yep.
With the prequel movies. And it established so many amazing things, introduced so many amazing characters, and it just did so many good things for Star Wars. I think this is one of the best Star Wars medias ever released. Like, I think this show, the main trilogy, and the prequels are the top three, like, elements. If we're talking about the Star Wars timeline, those are the three, like, top three. Clone Wars, main trilogy, and the prequel trilogy. Like,
I will
those
say,
are amazing.
Though, I'm glad we still are getting sometimes very good Star Wars content. Is The Mandalorian, for me, kind of took the torch of the Clone Wars, even though there is other Clone Wars spin-offs and stuff going on. But The Mandalorian is such a good show, and it takes elements and characters and stuff from the Clone Wars. And Andor, which I know you haven't watched yet, but Andor is an excellent TV, just a pure as TV, like well written, extremely dark. I think the darkest Star Wars thing we've gotten. Very realistic. And I think Star Wars is in kind of a bad place right now, but for me it's like a sports team of, even when your sports team is doing bad, they're always your team. And so for me, I'm always going to be rooting for Star Wars. And so when it gets back to a really good show, a really good thing comes out, I'm going to still be here ready to sing the praises of that good show, that good TV.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I've kind of checked out of Star Wars a little bit, to tell you the truth. Like, I still have not finished Mando Season 3. I haven't watched Ahsoka. I haven't watched Rebels. I haven't watched Andor. So I'm very out of the loop. I mean, granted, I'm working, like, all the time. I never have that much spare time.
Adulting.
Yeah, adulting. I never have, like, that much spare time anymore, but maybe I should try to get back into it a little bit and give some of those shows a shot, because, I mean, Andor does look really interesting to me. I really enjoyed his character in Rogue One. I thought he was really cool. So maybe I will have to give that show a try.
Definitely.
So, yeah, definitely. All right, well, dude, I think we've talked about, everything that I wanted to discuss. Now, guys, I gotta tell you, if any parents are listening to this, if you have, like, a young kid looking for a good show to watch, I mean, I'm telling you, Clone Wars is a good show. I think it's a good show for kids to watch, overall. I really think so.
I wouldn't say too young, though.
Not too young.
As you get into the later seasons, there is stuff where it's like, okay, if this is a really little kid, it might disturb them a bit. But I mean, it's still a kid show at the end of the day. So if long as they're a little older, 7, 8 years old, I think they would be plenty mature enough to understand what's going on and not get spooked by it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is one of the best shows I've ever seen. It'll always be my show that I grew up with, that means the world to me. So I hope you guys really did enjoy this discussion. I always love getting the opportunity to talk with this guy about anything. Like, I feel extremely honored to have him back on the show again, and I'm very glad we got to have this awesome discussion.
Yep, thanks for bringing me on again.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this episode. I'm so happy that we finally got a chance to do it, and I hope you learned something cool, and I hope you enjoyed this. So I have a lot of other cool ideas on the way. As I mentioned when the recording started, I'm planning on doing another collab with my friend Catelyn Davis and discussing Coraline. She's really wanted to do that episode. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think you will really enjoy that one. And I have a long list of other topics I can't wait to discuss with you. So there is a lot of very cool content on the way very soon. So until next time, my name is Christian Taylor with
Jonathan White.
And you are listening to the Tales of Music and Film.